Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for part two of our series reviewing the first round of new gTLD applications. In this episode, our host Ashley Roberts met with Nisha Parkash, Head of Domain Management at Sky, to talk about the .SKY TLD. Without further ado, let's begin.
So Nisha, thanks for joining us. And can I start by asking you to tell us a bit about how the business has used .SKY over the past couple of years?
Hey Ashley, thank you for having me. Yes, of course. So it's been a good 10 years that we've been building the .sky registry. We currently have over 100 domain names in the registration of the .sky registry. One thing that is not always obvious is that most of our registrations actually support backend infrastructure. And I just wanted to highlight that because I think a lot of people focus on, having a registry and thinking the only use case is front end. Over the years, we've had real success stories for building major platforms in the back end, but all to .sky. And the benefits there is we know how secure that registry is.
Interesting. That's a really interesting point, Nisha. Thank you. Yeah, I suppose people are often looking for websites that end in .sky, but highlighting the importance of the .brand in infrastructure. Can I ask you, how have you managed to build support within the organization in .sky?
So I think a lot of what we've done is almost like campaigning. Not a lot of people understand the internet space, and that's really obvious even now. I think people don't appreciate what a .com is or what a .co.uk is, but naturally people still gravitate towards .com being king. So how do you get the word out that you actually have your own registry? Ultimately, it's marketing, and where we sit within the business is just super key, because we're not legal, we're not marketing, we are domain managers. So there's a team of 4 of us, and because we're dedicated specialists in the domain space, we get to talk about all options and all opportunities within domain registration. So when we have new opportunities come our way, or rebrand opportunities, it's just finding the gaps. And instead of naturally just saying, okay, yeah, we'll register your .com, Mr. Stakeholder, we naturally will talk about .sky first. And, if you're going to go out there and build a use case around .sky, you've got to have some real valuable information to give not only your stakeholders internally, but you have to think about the customer at the same time. So it really depends on what the project might be, what the launch might be. But in order to get word out there, you have to be somebody that is passionate enough to talk about it and understand the value.
Great, thank you. Thinking about the range of different use cases that you've implemented so far for .sky, is there any particular one that you're most proud of or happy with?
Yeah, there's one scenario that will always forever stand out with me with .sky. And it was when we migrated a legacy subdomain off sky.com, which was our corporate site. So we, for years, had our corporate information on corporate.sky.com. And, naturally people are always thinking about sky.com, the SEO, the reach, and why would you take anything off your main domain? We migrated that to our first corporate site, skygroup.sky. I think what stands out for me is the fact that this was a huge website and it had so much archive, and the archive had to remain because it was a legal requirement. So, being able to take a site like that and 100% move it onto a completely new domain, and not only that, a .sky domain, was something that was, you would think was impossible, but when you see the possibilities and when you achieve what you set out to achieve, that was definitely a major highlight for me.
So I know that you've done a lot of different things with .sky so far, but is there anything that you haven't done yet that you'd like to do in the future?
Yeah, so we've got a real mixed bag of registrations in the .sky registry. As I mentioned, we serve .sky serves backend infrastructure, major platforms. We have domains registered purely for internal use, so we'll only resolve on the internal network. And then we've got, we're building up a kind of corporate space where you will see kind of customers being able to, it will resolve to customer content or corporate content. I think right now the focus is really bringing more of the customer registrations. So some of our big products, we still have a lot of big products on the .com TLD. And, for me, right now, in the position that we're in, our product launches are always going to be generic terms, and we'll always struggle now in this day and age to register domains easily to the .com space. So for me now, I would like to see some of our products being launched to .sky, like our future big products, and some of our existing products, I'd like to see those migrations to .sky rather than even seeing it on sky.com.
Great, thank you. Now we know the next gTLD application round is due to commence around 2 years from now in early 2026. So based on your experience in the space, do you think it's important that any prospective applicants for the next round begin their preparation early?
Yeah, there's no harm in doing your research now. There are several things that I think I can impart wisdom on in terms of what the process might look like internally. But I do think that it's not just about the internal approach. It's really important to have an external third party involved in what I would call a feasibility study. I think one thing to kind of note here is that there is firstly so much help around outside your organization, and so tap into that. Like obviously companies like Laude, you'll be able to assist in the things that I would be talking about now. But I think it's really important to get your internal stakeholders together first and foremost. I think you'd need like your marketing specialists, you'd want someone from legal, you'd want someone in the brand protection space for sure. And especially if you don't have like a dedicated domain manager within your organization, because, when I speak, I talk about just purely managing domain names and sort of DNS, whereas in big organizations, you might be in the legal team or you might be in the marketing team, and domain names aren't your full focus. So, being able to bring a variety of people from the business around, and actually sometimes it's really valuable to bring in somebody that has absolutely no idea about intellectual property. So they could be even an apprentice, like just sitting in a room and getting their thoughts on what you're talking about. But you're not alone. Like I said, it's important to have companies come in and also listen to case studies. And especially now we've got 10 years of good research that you can share. Whereas back kind of 10, 12 years ago when the first round happened, there was nothing to go by, right? But now you've got so many people that can take you through the process. But creating a feasibility study is really important. And one really major thing that I would say is every single person needs to sign an NDA, because it's really important that nobody knows what you're trying to do, especially if your word is generic. If I talk for myself, our word is completely generic. And if we didn't actually sign an NDA and you're going to, hear people talk about this, it's only going to take another person to go, that's a great idea, I'm going to go after it as well. So yeah, the NDA is probably one of the biggest things that I would suggest that every single person involved definitely signs. You do not want to create any noise around this when you're going through your feasibility study. You just want to get to the conclusion, and that is getting a delegated TLD.
Thanks, Nisha. Some really great advice there. If someone asked you why they should apply for a .brand, what would your advice be to them?
I can really talk from managing a 3-letter generic word, which is something we all sit under. I can't say managing the word Sky has been easy, but what the takeaway is when you are, especially in the generic space, having to think about new launches and are you going to be able to get new domains that are to the .com space now? Like, that is one of my biggest problems. Like, we have a new launch and the first word will typically be Sky. The second word of the product is going to be another generic word. Am I going to find that with .com? Probably not. And if I am, someone's bought it and wants to sell it to me for about £1 million because they know our buying potential, right? So they know how much money we've got to spend. And even if you do it anonymously, and don't get me wrong, I've had some really good wins anonymously as well, believe it or not, with the word Sky in it. But sometimes it's exhausting because you just don't know when the end is. And also, who has an unlimited budget? What I love about having this registry is, number one, it's an option. And nobody can take that option away from me. I can do what I want in that registry for any single stakeholder. But I think the really good thing is like a media company, for example, and it will open up so much opportunity even for non-media companies. Because when I talk about media company, we do so many short-term campaigns and they are just 6 weeks or maybe like a week. And I'm pretty sure like other companies do this, or maybe they want to do this, but they just find it maybe just too costly because you need to register a domain, then you have to keep that domain, then you have to keep renewing that domain. One thing with having our registry, I can fire up a name, give it to someone for 6 weeks and take it away. And I can keep doing that. And, the other thing to note is that a registry is of all different sizes. So you can pay for a much smaller registry if your use cases are always high turnover. So say within the year, you only have a domain for 2 months, you can register that domain and take it away. You don't have to hold on to that for the whole year and pay for something for a whole year. So yeah, I mean, like there's been so many valuable situations where I've not been able to register a .com, or we've had short-term campaigns and we just want to do something really quickly and take it away really quickly, and it doesn't affect also like what we call as domain squatters having an eye on what we're doing. Because a lot of people don't realize that as a company, like as a big organization, if you register a domain name and it might be the most obscure name, and you know that you only want it for 7 weeks, but a domain squatter now thinks this has become such a valuable string, and they'll start registering every variation and think that they're going to sell it back to you. And then it just becomes a bit of a cat's cradle because you never really wanted the name for that long in the first place. But now you've generated this sort of interest in this domain string with domain squatters that all of a sudden you might see phishing emails, you might see smishing come from it. You'll see like bot mail, you'll see all this stuff, which we can avoid by just keeping it in the .sky registry. And it kind of causes people to think less about infringing on us.
Okay, and the final question for today, are there any limitations that you've seen with the operation of .sky that you'd like to talk about?
Yeah, and I think this will be for anyone that has a brand TLD. There are best practices that you need to definitely consider. I think, it's all well and good us sitting here going, yeah, having a .brand TLD is amazing, but you have to add some logic to actually running this registry. Now, for us, for example, if we're having a new launch that is an NDA and we cannot let that information go until press release, you cannot at any point put a registration in your registry because it's public knowledge. The who is for our .brand registry is public. And the other thing is only Sky owns .sky. So the moment I put a domain string into that registry that represents a new launch, we've just basically made that publicly available before press release. The other thing to note is there are restrictions around territories and jurisdictions. It's not as easy as me registering Portugal.sky, for example. I might have to go to the Portuguese government and say, can I register Portugal.sky in my registry? So those things are, you just be mindful of. Like you might, hear people like me, domain managers like me saying, yeah, there's all this free reign. But I know my restrictions and I know where I need to add limitations during that process. The other thing to be aware of is, consistency within your registrations is really important. Something, it's not a limitation, but I definitely want to like express that being able to create a consistent registration profile is really key, because don't forget that like sometimes the domain squatter might actually try and register the .com, and you cannot forget about the .com as well. So you might want to have that in the back of your mind, that although you're using your registry, you still need to have a contingency plan in the other TLDs. So yeah, you know, think about still the bigger picture, but you know, you just have to be mindful that, you know, you'll hear great use cases, but definitely that goes back down to, you know, having a feasibility study, for example. These conversations will happen during that time before you start going and applying.
Great, thank you, Nisha. Really appreciate your time and your insight today.
Thank you very much to everyone for listening. If you have any questions or would like to have a chat with us, please send an email to podcast@comlade.com. That's podcast@comlade.com, and we'll get in touch with you. If you want to hear more on the next round of new gTLDs, follow our podcasts on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a great day.